This video is sponsored by Blinkist. Understand key ideas from books in just 15 minutes. Use the link in the description and you'll receive 1 free week and 25% off an annual premium membership. You are sitting in a small alleyway between your apartment building and the building next door, getting some fresh air and enjoying some coffee. A single snowflake falls on the ground next to you. You don't notice. Not long after, another snowflake falls in the same relative spot. Again, you don't notice. Over the following couple of hours, more snowflakes fall in the same concentrated area, directed by a draft and a small whirlwind created by the space between the two buildings. At some point, you notice, and you determine that you are now sitting next to a heap of snow. You were there observing the same area the whole time, but only now do you determine that next to you is a heap of snow. But then, when did the snowflakes turn into a heap? Did one additional snowflake cause this change? Which number snowflake did, if one did? Can a single snowflake possibly be the difference between a non-heap of snow and a heap? What if now, after the snow is stopped, assuming you could, you take an individual snowflake off of the heap? Would it still be a heap? What if you took another snowflake off? And another? What if you kept taking snowflakes off? Would there be a point along the way at which the heap would no longer be a heap? At some point, ultimately, you'd be left with only one snowflake. Certainly not a heap. But if one snowflake is not a heap, then is 2? Is 3? Now we are back where we started. Is there really such thing as a heap at all? This is a version of what is known as Sorites paradox. In plain terms, the paradox is that if a single flake of snow, or grain of sand, or anything similar, is not a heap, then adding one flake to it does not create a heap. It seems impossible that one flake could make the difference between a non-heap and a heap. So, therefore, 2 flakes are also not a heap. However, using this logic, no matter how many flakes of snow are continually added one by one, there will never be a heap of snow. But of course, we know there can be heaps of snow. Hence, the paradox. This paradox points out a problem with how we define, classify, and identify things, how language maps onto reality, and how we manipulate reality with language. Arguably, the term heap refers to a concept, a quality of something, in this case, the quality of a group of things. The problem and paradox, however, is caused by the vagueness of the term. Heap doesn't have clear boundaries for what it is or isn't. When we see a heap, we know that's a heap, but the vagueness of what a heap actually is in reality becomes clear when one is taken apart. When we break a heap down, the concept of a heap breaks down itself. Although this is most easily and clearly exemplified in something like a heap, a similar problem can arise when referring to almost anything. The problem of universals. In the case of heaps of snow, philosophically, the term heap here is considered a universal. The specific heap next to you is what is referred to as a particular, or the specific instance in which the universal is exemplified. More broadly, universals are properties that are fully instantiated or exemplified by different objects and phenomena in the world. This includes things like greenness, squareness, tallness, beautifulness, and so on. These entities are abstract, so they don't exist in time and space, and thus, they can exist in multiple places at the same time. Conversely, particulars are concrete, which do exist in time and space, and thus can only exist in one place at any given time. For example, imagine there are 2 heaps of snow now, one next to you and one across the street. They are both heaps of snow, and so, in this sense, they are both the same thing. And this is where universals come in. But of course, they are also completely different things. They both are made of entirely different snow, formed into different shapes, exist in different places, and so forth. Each heap here is its own particular, so both are the same thing, heaps of snow, and yet both are different things. As another, perhaps less extreme and clearer example, consider the chair you are sitting on while observing the snow. Let's say the chair is green. In this case, the chair under you is the particular in which the universals of things like greenness and chairness are represented. Now, let's also say you have 3 more of the same chair. Each of these other chairs are the exact same color, shape, size, and of the same manufacturer. But yet, they are of course all different particular chairs. They each occupy different space at different times, they are each made of entirely unique collections of matter, and so forth. Their existence is wholly separate and unique from each other, and yet, simultaneously, they are all the same chair, and that's most likely how you, or anyone, would refer to them when speaking generally. But what actually makes something the same as other things if each individual instance of the thing is a completely different thing, a separate physical object or phenomenon? Or put differently, how can different things have identical properties if they are different things? The problem in philosophy, known as the problem of universals, stems from this obscurity and how we identify what makes things the same, the convoluted nature of sameness and separateness. The most intuitive and obvious way to deal with this problem is to just describe the qualities that things have in common, and if they have enough in common, then referring to them with the same universal is justified. But now, we're back at the problem of the heap. How many properties in common make things the same thing? How many metaphorical grains of sand or flakes of snow suddenly permit one individual thing into a group of the same thing? Taking it even further, to say that objects have something in common means that there must be this other thing in reality that they have in common. Greenness, heapness, chairness, bigness, and so on. Using the example of the chairs, if the green color, small size, chair shape, and manufacture make the chairs the same, then the greenness, smallness, chairness, and manufactureness must be a present thing that exists in each chair. One cannot say that green makes one thing the same as something else if green isn't a real present part of reality. But what really is chairness and greenness? Are they actually real parts of reality? This is the problem of universals. Do these abstract properties exist beyond the objects they are instantiated by? And if so, in what way? The philosophical camp known as realists believes that universals, like greenness, chairness, heapness, and so on, actually do exist in reality and are independent of the mind. This line of thinking follows from the theory of forms developed by the classic Greek philosopher Plato, in which Plato drew a distinction between two realms of reality: physical objects that we can perceive with our senses, and the realm of ideas which we can only grasp through our intellect and reason. Since, for Plato, all objects in the physical world change over time, like, for example, a rock will erode and become sand, but ideas, like the idea of a rock, are ultimate and enduring, then the realm of ideas is more real than the realm of objects. If particulars are to have meaning, there must be universals, Plato says. Alternatively, the philosophical camp known as nominalists believe that universals are only terms used to describe things, but don't exist in reality. They are merely words and labels. Lastly, somewhat in the middle of the two, conceptualists believe that universals exist in our perception, but not in the outside world. In other words, they only exist within the mechanisms of our mind. Other philosophers, typically adjacent to nominalists, argue that there is never anything truly shared between two or more objects. Two green chairs both possess two unique qualities of greenness and chairness, entirely specific to each. We simply lump all the green chairs together only as a result of their resemblance to us. Here, we arrive at another philosophical problem: the criterion of identity, or principle of individuation. The criterion of identity relates to the following problem: how do we determine what makes an individual thing distinct from other things? What is the standard by which we are to judge the identity of something as being unique and itself? What makes you a person and not a heap of particles? What makes you you and not someone else, or someone different from yourself across time? Perhaps the best way to explore this problem is through the classic thought experiment, the ship of Theseus. After voyaging to Crete and slaying an evil minotaur, one of the most destructive and terrifying monsters of the Greek mythical world, the divine founder and hero of Athens, Theseus, sailed home. In commemoration of this unbelievable feat, the Athenians would decide to keep Theseus' ship in the harbor and meticulously maintain it, while each year reenacting Theseus' voyage. As years and years would go by, every time a part of the ship became worn, damaged, or defective, it would be replaced with an identical piece made of the exact same material. Gradually, after hundreds and hundreds of years, the ship in the harbor would become comprised of entirely new parts, with no original parts remaining. The question we are left with here is as follows: is the ship in the harbor still the ship of Theseus? After the first part of the ship is replaced, most people would likely still consider it the ship of Theseus. But if this is true, surely the second part being replaced, the third part, and quite a few more parts to come would still not affect the ship of Theseus being the ship of Theseus. But by the end, how can a ship that does not have a single part in common be the same ship? And if it isn't the ship of Theseus at this point, when did it stop being the ship of Theseus? If it is a different ship once one thing changes, weren't some things always changing to some degree before any parts were replaced? Mild erosions, scuffs, things being put on and taken off, and so on. If it's only the ship of Theseus, if Theseus uses it, been on it, or perhaps owns it, what if he had been on parts of the new one and is considered the owner? And what if someone then took all of the old parts that were removed and then put them back together in the form of another ship? Now there are two ships that he's been on and owned in different capacities. Which would be the true ship of Theseus if there can only be one? Which one is more his? Are perhaps neither the ship of Theseus? Ultimately, this paradox demonstrates the vagueness and uncertainty around the persistence of identity. In a world of change and plurality, we cannot clearly and concretely define what something is over time. Moreover, we cannot clearly tell that something is the same thing as itself over time. We can only call it the same thing and create or lean into the illusions of the mind that help us organize and form a linear tracking of things. Together, the ship of Theseus, the criterion of identity, the problem of universals, and Sorites' paradox demonstrate how terms and concepts have a much looser relationship with reality than we like to think. Ultimately, we use terms and ideas to communicate and interface with the world of objects and other people. But even in just these fairly simple cases of examination, the methods of language, conceptualization, and categorization reach the limits of their abilities. It is an incredible wonder and achievement that given the uncertainty and obscurity of all of this, everything in the world, the human mind can still so easily and intuitively form such impressive feats of organization and perceptual calibration, of understanding the world in a coherent and functional way, in a way that can allow societies and cities to be built, love to be expressed, confusion to be articulated, shared, and overcome. We form our systems, our identities, our preferences, our knowledge, real or pseudo, out from this ability, and perhaps at bottom, that's all that really matters. But perhaps also, at times, it can be useful to dive headfirst into the heap of obscurity and examine things just a little bit closer. To remember that everything we think we know and think we are is far more malleable, vague, and uncertain. And in doing so, we can perhaps counteract the fair share of problems that come with rigid attachment to ideas and thinking in terms of binary opposition. We can perhaps counteract prejudice, bias, narrow-mindedness, and so on. In truth, we have all come to hold our illusions and frameworks of perception near and dear. But take one flake away, one wooden plank away, one part of your brain away, and what are you left with? This video was sponsored by Blinkist. Consider one more paradox. You have just discovered the app Blinkist, where you can understand the most important ideas from over 6,600 nonfiction books through 15-minute explainers. After getting the app, first you listen to The Stuff of Thought by Steven Pinker, where you learn about what language teaches us about human nature, how it affects human behavior, and often gets us into trouble. It's so thought-provoking, convenient, and enjoyable, you immediately continue on to a second book, The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, where you learn about the fluidity of everything and how to understand what you cannot describe. You continue using Blinkist every day, listening to at least several explainers every week. At the end of each week, your knowledge significantly increases, and you vastly improve your understanding of yourself, the world, your career, and so on. Of course, however, at the end of each week, you feel like the same person. By the end of the year, however, after continuing this habit and absorbing countless life-changing ideas on Blinkist, you feel like a completely different person compared to when you started. At what point, then, did you become a different person if you felt the same after each individual week? Can it be pinpointed? If not the first week, was it the second? The third? Was it at any point? Of course, this is an example of the ship of Theseus, and how this problem can so easily apply to many things. What isn't paradoxical, however, is that Blinkist makes it easy for just about anyone to become a new, improved version of themselves. And now, with Blinkist Spaces, you can easily share books with those close to you and help friends and family discover new versions of themselves as well, even without having Blinkist Premium. Click the link in the description and you'll receive a free 7-day trial and 25% off an annual premium blanket subscription. And of course, thank you so much for watching in general, and see you next video.